So we have a 40-minute panel up next on Can Allyship Confront Toxicity?
First of all, thank you everyone for coming. We're an interesting subject, and it's been very interesting to get panellists. And we've lost 3 as we've gone along. But thank you, Darren and Mick, for being our 2 people who've been consistent all the way through. So this is a series of panels and workshops that we've been doing across the last 12 months. And this came around really from a post that Mick put on LinkedIn, where he discovered some of the things that happened at GDC, and he was disgusted by what had happened. And Mick posted that disgust, of which I responded, I'm not surprised, and I'm surprised you're surprised. Which then led to an article in Pocket Gamer. No, it didn't. It was gamesindustry.biz. It's been a long day already. Where we talked about this. To follow on, just quickly to say, if anyone just saw that psychological safety talk, I think this is psychological safety on an industry level, and that's what we're talking about. Anyway, so I'm here with Mick. I am Mick's ally because of what he wrote on LinkedIn, that I'm here to support the changes that he wants to be made in the industry, particularly around the toxicity against women. My name's Gina Jackson, and I run a company called SKILLfull. So Mick, do you want to introduce yourself and why you're here?
Thanks, Gina. Well, I think you've done a fairly good introduction of how we find ourselves here. Mick Morris, I've been in the industry 25 years. Thought I'd seen a few things, but clearly I'd been sort of living under a rock for quite a lot of the 25 years, as Gina pointed out to me after my ranty LinkedIn post. But I think one of the most telling things for me, Gina, when you said, once you see, you won't be able to unsee, has been like really fundamental for me. It's been a seismic sort of shift, really. I'm just far more finely attuned to, stories. It's not just the games industry, right? It's female surgeons, it's female conductors in the music industry, it's every industry. What was it last week? It was that idiot Joey Barton, I don't really follow football, but, I'm attuned to these stories now and this idiotic behaviour.
It's not just against women, and that was something that you were quite surprised at when we talked about spiking, that it's happened to a lot of people and it's not gender specific. So It really is about toxicity in general. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been quite a journey. The first one was at Develop, with a full room. BAFTA HR conference was a real sort of eye-opener for me as well. And getting that take from the HR professionals, who I don't think we get to hear enough from. And I thought that whole day at BAFTA was really fascinating, and I'm hoping that GI Biz that could easily be a 2-day event. And what was really coming across there was that I don't think HR professionals get to, sort of sit in a room with their peers and have those sort of honest discussions. And a lot of really fascinating takeaways came from that. It really has been. It's been quite a remarkable year. Darren, the reason we asked you to join the panel is because you joined us at that round table, and you were very outspoken. No, outspoken's the wrong word. You were very vulnerable, and you brought your leadership to that table about what happens in your own organisation. So maybe you could just introduce yourself and tell us why you're happy to be part of the panel.
Yeah, sure. My name's Darren. I'm the studio director at Atomhawk. This is my 32nd year in the industry. I know, don't look old enough. Thank you very much. Obviously then I've seen quite a lot from the very early days up until now. Obviously being a black male, I've seen a lot from the early days up until now. And I think a lot of my experiences, a lot of them are shared with women, and the kind of things that you see and you hear. It's really important for me to be able to stand up as a black male in this industry, because there's not very many, and support anything I can to stop toxicity anywhere. It's a really difficult thing to kind of, first of all, I think, pin down, and secondly, to do something about, because it takes a lot of courage to do something about it. You know, back in the day when I first started in '92, it was an all boys club. You know, women very rarely there. If there was a woman there, it was the secretary. Very few black faces or mixed, you know, faces at all back then. And it was quite obvious when things were toxic. It was over toxic. It was almost a parody of itself. So it was very easy to spot. I think as years gone on, people have got a bit wiser. It's got a bit nuanced, and you know, it's those kind of really little things that you've got to, you know, you're unaware of it because you're a white male, so you're unaware of it. You know, if you're a woman, if you're a person of colour, you can spot things a mile off at a millisecond. You know, if someone's racist, if someone's sexist, you'll catch it. You'll see it in a millisecond because you've grown up with it. You know those signs and you know what you're talking about. And when you feel that, there's reason why you're feeling that. And those are the kind of really kind of small, undetectable things by anyone else that we've got to pick up on. We've got to teach everybody else how to pick up on that and what to look out for. Then to recognise it first, then do something about it. And if you can't do it yourself, just put your hand up and say it in the first place. That's the most kind of thing, you know, the most courageous thing you can do is just say it in the first place. You don't personally have to do anything about it, but if you're sticking your hand up and you're saying it and you've seen it, someone like me who's been through it and got to a position where I'm a studio director now so I can do something about it, you know, we need people to shout up. And I think that's why I'm here, to help add that voice to it and kind of give as much experience as I felt as I can.
So, Tom, thank you for joining us very last minute. We were supposed to have Christian here from, but maybe you can tell us why you were happy to jump in last minute to something that might be seen as a controversial subject.
Yeah, I think I am a stand-in for Christian. This is a topic that he is really passionate about, and it's very unfortunate circumstances why he can't be here. But it's also a topic that is super evil we take really seriously. So I'm sort of trying to represent the company, but personally why I'm happy to be here is I think, you know, if you all see me, a white male in my 30s, having this conversation, being part of this conversation, hopefully that will inspire others to also just say something, just open your mouth and, you know, talk about it, because I think that's what we really need to be doing, is talking about this more, talking about toxicity in all of its forms. And so, you know, I don't have the experience that you do here in any form. I mean, you're 30 years, that's amazing. But I'm just hoping that my presence here will inspire others to also be part of the conversation.
So thank you. We've also unfortunately lost Sarah Sorrell from the mental health charity Safe in Our World and Tracy from Sega Hardlight. But I'm delighted that they agreed before they got ill to come and be part of this panel. So just to ask you all, what do you think we can do as individuals or companies to confront toxic behaviour? Is there a policy or a change in behaviour or calling out stuff or being public on panels? Now, you've part answered the question, some of you, but I just wondered if anyone wanted to go more deeply into that, on what can individuals or companies do that makes it more public?
I think listening to the last kind of talk, it's making people feel safe and secure that they can do that. You know, I've been to worked in many studios over the years, but Atomhawk is a very creative studio from lots of people all over the world, lots of people who identify as different to the norm, whatever the norm is. So it's slightly easier for me in that environment to kind of work with people and say, that's not on. We can't be saying that. You can't be thinking that. You can't be doing that. Even though there's kind of not much of it, luckily where I am, but I've seen lots of that. So I think it's making it feel safe environment enough so someone can come and talk to you about it, or just talk to someone else about it. So that's kind of what I put in place since the last panel and listening to what you were saying there.
But do you think that's because you're there as the leader? People know that you're not going to stand for anything, and therefore it doesn't become an issue. So that leadership piece, I think, is also partly missing from this.
Yeah, I think so, very much so. Again, the authenticity side of it. I can speak about it, and people will say, oh, well, yeah, I believe that has happened, and I can believe that that has happened to you. So bringing that to it helps, and, you know, like I said before, I'm very kind of, I'm not shy in coming forward and kind of saying that is not on, this is not what we do here. But, you know, thinking about studios I've been in previously, I can kind of see why that happened. And, you know, people don't want to upset the apple cart. You don't want to be the first one to stick out and say, you know, stick your head over the parapet and go, you know, actually, I don't believe that this is right. You know, I think you've done whether it was kind of brave or kind of accidental that, you know, what you did there. But, you know, what you're doing now is kind of standing up and going, actually, I've seen what's happening. I've seen this now. And I feel I've got to do something about it. So those are really important things.
I think anyone who watches Traitors understands groupthink much better than they did before. Yeah. But no, I find it remarkable that one person will say something and then to actually go against that person, you've got to openly challenge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I should probably watch less Traitors and think that's how the industry works. But as a leader in your company, that's quite easy to do if it's your company. But in a setting like this, where you get lots of people from lots of different companies with different cultures and different understanding, is there something that we can all bring into an event like this that say we're in the bar after this, or we're at a lunch event and somebody says something? How do people know that we've got each other's backs? And that's not just to Darren. Go on, Mick. Answer that difficult question.
Well, I was reading something a couple of days ago, and it's reporting on the finance industry and how they've been supposedly cleaning up their act, but it's been sort of creeping out of the office and more into conferences like this. And as you know, that sort of pernicious behaviour, and men are getting more, you know, it's less obvious in the workplace, but you know, I guess those men will gravitate towards going to events where there is alcohol, and you know, they can get away with more of it. But the comment that caught me was about younger men joining that particular industry with the best of intentions that they're not going to become, you know, like that. But that doesn't seem to last particularly long, because when they see their peers and they see older, you know, men behaving like that, then it becomes the norm, I suppose. So,
well, like our Home Secretary. Sorry, just a thought there. But how anyone that high up in politics can make a joke about spiking and not get sacked?
Right.
I just find it unbelievable that that's how badly women are seen in that environment. Yeah. That no one is willing to stand up to someone with that much power.
Without that level of seniority, and it is that. I think it's from within studios. It has to be a cultural thing. It has to be led from the top. You have to be seen to be leading fearlessly and having zero tolerance to this sort of behavior in your own studio. But also when we're out at events or at pretty much any time, what happened to, you know, you're representing your company wherever, you know, pretty much wherever you are. So, you know, I think we all have a responsibility as men to, you know, just don't be dicks. You know, and if you're at an industry event, then you've got a responsibility for, you know, how we are seen by, you know, our younger peers. So it's just one reflection on it, I suppose.
Is there, unless you wanted to say anything on that, Tom, no. Is there any way for us as an industry or as industry leaders to hold the rest of the industry to account for creating environments that are safe for employees, freelancers, or players? I want to include players in that as well, because I think they're an important part of our ecosystem that sometimes we don't feel like we need to take responsibility for. And if you wanted to...
Yeah, I think, you know, the player point is really interesting. You know, I've been in the room many times where we're talking about our players, and then by default we're using, you know, he, him vocabulary. We're talking about, you know, teenage boys always. And it's, you know, we've got to start breaking those stereotypes. We've got to be really careful with our language at every step whenever we're talking about anyone. Not making the assumption that they are just going to be a young white male, probably somewhere in the US. It's very easy to say, well, that's our average player, so we should just focus on them. But I think, it goes beyond just thinking about who they are, but then also like, well, how do we protect everyone else? And so, how do we build out the tools that protect people when they are a victim of toxicity? It's very easy to ban someone from your game, but then they just come back. How do we actually educate our players around the damage that the toxicity is doing? And I guess, the question then is like, well, whose responsibility is it to do that education? Is it us as, the company who owns the game? That should we be, telling our players to stop being dicks? Or should it be, society as a whole? Like, how do we start this movement? I think, the best way is that we at least start talking about it. And that's why this, it's really difficult because, I've met the players, I've done lots of these consumer research panels, and when you're one-on-one with them and you're interviewing them, they're really lovely. And then, you put them behind a screen and they're anonymized, and then, it's foul, some of the things. We've all played multiplayer games here, I'm sure. And some of the language that's used online is just not okay. And it's really hard to even challenge that behavior there and then because, I'm only challenging them as an anonymous person behind the screen, and all I'm going to get back is abuse. And so, why would I want to stick my neck above the parapet for that situation?
Do you think the issue is confused, but they're also, by the fact that they're also our consumers, they're the people who pay for our content, and the most vocal are often those that play the most. So in a way, we almost let them get away with it because that's who's paying our bills.
I think
or
we
is that
do,
nuance not
but
really
I think,
true?
How much money would we be getting from the players that we've turned away because we've allowed this toxicity to happen with our games? We know that teenage boys will go and buy the next COD Mobile release or whatever it is that's coming out. But, how many women out there would want to play those games if they knew that they were going to have a safe, fun time doing so and not, have someone yelling at them just for having spoken on the microphone? So I do think that, from a pure business standpoint, there's a huge opportunity out there that if we can get rid of toxicity within our games, that we're going to attract new players to these genres that are then going to go on and play other games. And so really by not, I don't believe that if we could combat toxicity, teenage boys are not going to leave just because we got rid of toxicity. It's just going to attract more players into the industry. And that's why, again, purely if we're just thinking numbers and money, it's really important for us to deal with this because it is just going to lead to, increasing the value of the games industry.
I think it's kind of wise to point out as well, we're not going to stop it. It's not going to stop. So we're not here to say, brilliant, 5 years' time, it's all going to end, happy days, because it's not. There's still racism, there's still sexism, and we've been talking about it forever. So I think it's those small steps and chipping away at it to ensure that perhaps in 50 years' time, it's really common set for people to just call people out on it. And people then start thinking twice about, should I say that? And again, we can't police everybody. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. You've got to allow people to have their own opinions. It's just when do you voice that, when it's appropriate to do that, and what are the circumstances around that? So I think it's just, really careful to make sure we manage expectations on it because, you mentioned football earlier. The Stamp It Out campaign's been going for years. There's still racism. It was in the news this week where someone, a couple of games got stopped because, goalkeepers was getting abused or players were getting abused, so they stopped the game. So it's still going on.
But at least they stopped the game.
But they stopped the game.
And they took
that's
the players
the thing.
off the pitch.
Yeah.
That was good.
And that's the thing. It's kind of, you need someone to make that bold decision and go, this isn't cool. It isn't right. And we've got to stop it. But baby steps, I think.
So where do we get that leadership within our industry to do that? How do we develop some cross-industry thinking so that we're sticking together and people are clear that, with these people in the room, this will not be tolerated? Or is it down to individuals, or do we say at an event like this one, they have a really clear policy? Or looking at who's in the room, at a WASD, that this will not happen. Is it up to the events to make that clear? Is it up to individuals, or is it a combination of all of that?
I think it's all of them. I think, what you did in mentioning it on on your post that you did, that's really good because you're putting a focus on it and you're calling them out publicly. Now, you're going to get into libel if you start naming names, so you can't name names, but you can publicly say, this event was awful, and it was awful for these reasons. And if people stop going to those events because of that, they'll have to change it. So I think it's that, again, it's calling it out, have the kind of the strength to call it out, and call it out often enough that people start listening and going, yeah, that isn't cool, we can't do that. I won't go to that event because I've heard it's like this, so I'm not going to go. So it just takes more, and I hate to say it takes more white men to stand up and go, it ain't cool. You know, we can't be talking about this, we can't be doing that. And, you know, all other men are more likely to do, but I'm saying white men because there's more white men in the industry than any.
So this all started of reports coming out of GDC. Is anyone not going to go to GDC because of what happened at last GDC? You don't have to answer all the questions, Darren. Yeah. Are you not going to go to GDC now you know what happened?
I have to go to GDC because it's part of my job. But I was very reluctant this year to press that button and genuinely thinking, how can I get out of it? But I can't. Like, it is my job to do business development. But I know throughout the conversations with the rest of this year, a lot of people have said, I don't want to do GDC. Whether it's directly connected to the events of last year, but I don't know. But I have to go.
I'd be interested to, you know, if you did an article on why you find it such kind of, you know, a thing to go to now, and how you've changed your thinking, and why now, unless you had to go, you perhaps wouldn't go. I think that would be interesting, kind of like to tell people and say, look, this is what I'm thinking now. You know, it was toxic for me. It was toxic for other people. How can we change it? And, you know, by speaking out and putting that out to others, perhaps they're going to go, do you know what? I didn't think of it in that way.
Yeah. But it's not, you know, it's not unique to GDC, is it? It's not just one. That just happened to be the catalyst that, you know, for me. But it's not one show.
No, but it's also a show where a lot of deals get done. So I'm trying to balance off the commerciality of doing stuff versus having just to put up with things. And as a woman who's worked in games industry, biz dev, you've just had to get on with it, whether you liked it or not. And that's with individuals and with and events. And you'd find allies in the room. I know that I can go from there to there because that person's safe and that person's safe. So I've just got to go round those 7 people there and get through there, and that'll be fine. Every other woman in the industry has that map, has those people who are allies, and goes through. Oh, Nina's.
I can see every woman in front of me smiling on that.
Yeah,
you know what you're
we've done that.
about,
Yeah. But you have those allies in the room. I mean, we did talk at the develop one. Some people wanted to give allies armbands so that we knew who they were in the room. But there was a lot of pushback from, we don't need another badge or something else to do. No, I know. We're not going to have armbands.
That they could use the badge to hide. If they're wearing a T-shirt or a badge, then they can hide behind it.
So we'd really like this to be a conversation. And the last 3 chats or the presentations, no one got a chance to ask questions. So we'll keep going for another couple of minutes, and then I will happily open this up to the room, because it needs to be a conversation for all, not 3 people lecturing from the stage, because we're only going to solve this together as a group. So if anyone has any questions, catch my eye and we'll come to you. So I'm going to jump to a last question and then come back. Is there any way you think we can measure how well we've improved? How do we know when we've got somewhere better? Do we just wait for spiking stories? Do we wait for them to go down and say, oh, we've got better? Do we need to measure our progress? And if so, how do we do that?
I mean, at Super Evil, we've taken a slightly active approach towards trying to measure this. You know, we do our yearly DEI survey internally, completely anonymous. We ask everyone, you know, just trying to get a measure of how people identify, what their backgrounds is, you know, where, you know, maybe their educational status as well. Just to try and keep a pulse on it. This is particularly relevant for us as we're recruiting very actively right now. And so as the company grows, it's really important that we try to maintain some kind of pulse check on how we're growing and where we're growing. And so, we've also built this into our appraisal process every year as well. So we have 5 company values, and the first 2 are all around, inclusivity and diversity. I think it's integrity and citizenship, and then directly a DEI value. And so we incorporate questions on those into our appraisal process so that we can ensure that we are continuing to talk about this, that our line managers are talking to our employees, and that we are rating ourselves and rating individuals as well on how we are progressing on those measures. Doesn't help on the industry standard, but at least it tries to keep us honest, and it can see how we're growing, and then we can try and take course correcting action as well. It's tough though. I mean, we are, the ideal would be 50-50 even split across everything, and we are nowhere near that.
Kind of similar, Atomhawk are part of Sumo Group, and Sumo Group are very kind of aware and very kind of active in kind of making sure people feel inclusive, and there's lots of procedures in place. There's lots of talks that happen. There's safe spaces on Teams groups that people can go to and feel part of, and part of management go to that as well, just to kind of listen and understand and kind of hear more. So there's lots we can do, and we do as a studio, but it's that wider thing. The thing I've found generally is that the industry we're in, very creative, and you've creative people, and again I'll say tend to be more inclusive, because you're creative, you understand lots of things, you want to learn lots of different things. That's how you're creative. That's how you build yourself, is by being creative and being inclusive. If you're not inclusive, if you're not embracing other styles or other kind of peoples, you're not going to gain much yourself. You're not going to grow yourself. So it tends to be that. So I think we're not preaching to the converted, because we still need to convert lots of people in the industry, but we're certainly on a better footing than perhaps someone who works in a factory or works in a supermarket. And
can I be a challenger on this? I'm good at being a challenger, in brackets, difficult woman. So we've seen a lot of companies who've been incredibly successful but have a real bro culture, who I'd say don't really embrace that. The beautiful description you gave of creative people, but they've been massively successful.
I know who you're talking about, and I have worked for them in the past. So, and that's the people at the top. The people at the top, if they get away with it, then it encourages us and empowers them to do so. So, and most of them have gone now, thankfully. And it did take a revolution almost to get them out, and rightly so. But if that empowers more people now to go out and do that and start talking about it and feel free to talk about it, then brilliant. It had to happen, and that had to happen that way because the people who were in charge were like that. But generally speaking, I found this industry to be more than welcoming, to an extent. And I will throw out a cautionary note. The worst thing you can do is give someone a job, give them a position because of who or what they are. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because if that person fails, it makes it so much harder to do it the next time. Give that person that role or that job that deserve that. But what we've got to do is encourage more people, more diverse people to come in the first place and get that coming in. But tokenism, forget it. Doesn't work. And it'll blow up in your face, and it gets thrown back at you if it does blow up in your face. So make sure you're hiring the right people to do the right job, but make sure you give the opportunity to everybody to come and get that job. That's the only caution.
So it's back to that talk before about inclusivity, that absolute definition of inclusivity. Yeah. Although I've made a career out of being the token woman on a panel, so that's working really well for me. But we'll see how that goes. Mick, have you anything to add before we open it up? And I hope someone's going to ask a question.
No, because I think I've talked enough. So
we've got a question.
I'd really like to hear from the audience.
I can. Oh, okay. We'll go that way. Okay. Hiya.
Speak up. Oh, yep. It's on now. I just wanted to ask about something you've kind of talked about, particularly you, Darren. The fact that we have to kind of work in this broken system in order to try and make change. I mean, you've been in the games industry for 30 years, so you've had to have stuck around through some really not great points in your career to try and, to still be here, and now you can be someone, like, it's easier for other people joining the industry who see someone who's like themselves and is advocating for those things and is in a leadership position. And the discussion about GDC, like, do we still go? If people don't go, then that leaves who alone there to be preyed upon? Like, if all the people who have a problem with predatory behavior don't turn up. So I guess I just wanted to bring that up for discussion, like, how much crap do we have to put up with and then stay here before we draw a line? Where do we say enough is enough?
Can I add to that? That's why there are very few senior women left in the games industry, because most people just up sticks and went, I don't want to take this rubbish anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't have so many senior women. Like you, I joined in 92. I don't know why I'm still here. I'm some kind of sadist. Go on, Darren. I gave you a breath.
Yeah. It depends. Again, it's on the individual. I'm very stubborn. I like to stand by my principles. But I know it's very difficult for some people to do that, and they will reach a breaking point and will leave. Very talented people have left, and the industry's been worse for it. Again, all we can do is support that person and kind of say, we're your ally. We're here. We can help you through this, and let's call out. Let's get rid of the other people. One of the things that we look out for when we hire is we're very, very cautious about talented arseholes. And I've seen a lot of them. Doesn't matter how good you are, if you don't fit in, if you don't want to kind of, not be a dick, we don't want you. And, I can't help people who have come to the end of their tether. It's one of those things that it's lost. Unfortunately, it's lost. But going forward, by talking about it, by people in this room now who will move up in the industry, who have this line of thought and want things to get better, infiltrate, get there, and start pushing it out as the norm. And I think that's all we can do, because it's really unfortunate that we lost people. Why have I stuck around? I'm slightly different. That, being a black male, I've got certain people look at me in a certain different way, and that kind of angry black male kind of stereotype. This is my resting face. It looks angry. So unless you want to bring it, you're not going to come to me full on. And that's why I noticed the kind of really nuanced things more, because people have had to do that to me directly, because they couldn't come face on, because I can look after myself. But you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to look as if you can look after yourself. You shouldn't have to look as if, or act in a certain way. If you're female and you kind of want to get on, you don't have to act anything but female. But people have had to try and do that, and that's where it just gets too much, because you're not being your authentic self, and you have to stop.
I think there was a question just in front of you. Oh, there was one, and then we'll go that way.
Hiya. Oh, it's working now. It's interesting what you were saying about don't give somebody the job if they don't deserve it, effectively. That's what you're saying, is that the idea of tokenism. I'm an educator. I have been for many, many years now, and I find that it's not just about who's already in the industry, but who's coming through to it as well. So what are you guys, and what are your thoughts on how we encourage the future generations to come into this industry to rebalance things? Because at the moment, and again, working in schools and things, you do find predominantly the people with aspirations to come into this industry are young boys.
White, straight men. Let's be clear.
Exactly.
Let's be clear on who it is.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest kind of face for this is what you could be. I'm trying to encourage other people to come into this industry as well.
Yeah, so I know you said not to give the job to them, but one thing we try to do is give them the interview at least. You know, you never know. Until you actually talk to these people, you don't know exactly what their skills are going to be like or how good they're going to be at that job. At least give them the interview. And if it becomes clear, I've been in this situation, so it's become very clear that they are not the right person for this role. And so then I will try and pivot the interview into like giving them some advice, giving them some tips. You know, I've booked out my time for the next hour, so I'm going to try and give you some of my time to help grow this person. Particularly in the junior roles, I found this is much more applicable. And so then hopefully they will go and find the role that is right for them. And that they will still, you know, they'll leave that interview with some things that they can go do rather than just feel bad that the interview didn't go very well. And so that's personally what I try and do. In that
Yeah, which works really well for those people that are already in front of you and are coming through. But what about, I'm thinking about earlier than that. You know, your 14, your 15-year-old children who are coming through.
It's really difficult, and one of my other passions is kind of making sure we work with the education system. I go to lots of schools, I go to colleges, I go to universities. I took a year out and taught. And one of the things I learned from that, and I took that year out because of speaking to universities and colleges, and they're just not saying the right thing or teaching the right thing or kind of promoting the right thing. And one of the things that really stuck out for me is the place that I taught for a year was in Westall, which is in the West Midlands. Real diverse kind of area, you know, lots of black, Asian, people in there. I had one black kid in my class, and in some communities, it's just not seen as a viable option. You know, it's closed off to them. They don't know about it, don't understand it. And one of the many questions I got asked was, well, is it a career? You know, it's a bit of a laugh now, and well, I've been doing it for years, so yes, it is a career. So again, I like to grab them. I've got to be careful how I say this. I like to grab them early. You know, you've got to get them at school level and say, this is an absolute opportunity for you, and we will give you all of that advice and opportunities to do so. You know, my LinkedIn is full of people asking me questions constantly, and I try and get around to every single one of them to give them some advice, because that's the least I can do, because I owe it to everyone who's trying to come through to give you a boost, because I didn't have a boost. I had to work my way through and learn the pitfalls and get all the crap that came with it. So I can now say, okay, this is what I can do for you, this is how I can help you. But it needs communities, it needs schools giving out that message. This is a viable option for you. You can do this.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say that's a great message, and I really thank you for that. But I think schools don't really know what they're doing. I mean, I know working in the school myself, they don't know the industry, they don't know what's there for people. It needs people like you guys and everybody else in the room, for that matter, to be able to reach out and say, this is an opportunity for anybody.
But I think there's also an opportunity for us to hone in on career changes. We're an industry who are desperately short of mid to senior people, but we only insist in a dev environment of taking people who've been through the development cycle 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Why? We never really understand why, but that's just what we do. So I'd rather take someone junior and give them a promotion that they're not ready for than train someone who's moved from similar skills in a different industry to ours because we think we're dead special. We're not special.
Have
We're
you been looking
making
at
a
my
piece of
slides for my
interactive
talk?
software. No, but I mean, we can grab people. I'm special. Thanks, Mick. I know that David put his hand right up at the beginning, and then we'll... Shall I run to David? No, it's fine. You've got a loud voice.
We put on events. I don't need it. We put on events, and we have a code of conduct for all of our events. It actually started out with "Don't be a dick" was our messaging. We had to change it to "Don't be a jerk" because a parent complained. And by all, we are responsible for anybody who is in the bounds of our event. So I would challenge any events where you feel that something is not right, because it is our responsibility to make it that way. So we have to be allies as event producers as much as everybody else.
And I wrote quite publicly in the gamesindustry.biz thing about the man who stalked me on LinkedIn at an event which stopped me then going out to any event because I was terrified, and I just stayed in my room so that he didn't stalk me anymore.
Thank you. I'm just going to reiterate that as well. I think the key thing is to make sure you're being proactive and not reactive. I helped a certain company based in France who had a lot of problems with their CEO do some work on professional boundaries a few years ago. And I've also helped a few companies on codes of conduct. And it's encouraging that sometimes companies are not coming to me now just because something has happened and therefore we have to. It's also really encouraging, for instance, at Develop to see nDreams had a really good policy for the people who are on a stand that was very proactive and upfront rather than it being a reactionary thing as well. So it also makes sure you encourage people to look at codes of conduct, make sure you've got them. You know, have you done the work on professional boundaries, one for interactions with people, but also in interactions with players, because that does help people feel psychologically safe and have knowledge that there is somebody or something that they can go to as an advocate as well. So do the work in advance and not just reactionary. It's a shame that you have to, and at the same time it will help the team to feel safer, I think.
We're over time. Can we carry on? We're out of time. Is there anything after us? Yeah. Okay. I really try. So just quickly, thank you to everyone for turning up, being our ally. I've worked out who everyone is, and when I see you at the event, you're my map. Thank you. And thank you for all the panellists for turning up and just being very visible in what we're trying to do and change things. Thank you.
Round of applause, everyone. Thank you. It's obviously a very important subject and one that we need to have more so than just 40 minutes on a stage. It's one we need to be having all the time.